with the study of this book, Jesus in Our Days. And this is one of the fantastic books by Joanna de Angelis, psychographs by Divaldo Franco. A lot of her series, like a psychological series, this is series 1, volume 1 in her series of books. They're fantastic if you haven't had a chance to pick up any of the books. We have some of them here. You can find some on Amazon or otherwise other places on the web at other Spiritist centers and locations. But this particular book that we've been discussing, the chapters are small, they're not long. It's a chapter book. It's not like a novel where you read cover to cover. It's a book of messages meant for us to reflect and think about things. So today, her chapter is chapter 10. So our chapter today is called Jesus and Courage. So before we talk about what courage means to us, we wanted to share a true story. And hopefully it'll give us a good perspective and be a good backbone for today's presentation. So I will read you the story. It's quite short, but it's very interesting. So it's about a man and 2 other individuals and their encounter together and what happened. So this particular man is telling a story, what happened to him. He writes, "Late in the evening, I was walking in the park. Suddenly, I heard screams coming from behind the bushes. I stopped to listen and understood that a woman was being attacked. I heard sounds of fighting and muttering. For several moments, I was hesitating. Should I get involved? I panicked. I was frightened for my own safety. Maybe it is better to call the police. Then I realized that the woman's voice becomes weaker, so I knew I had to act quickly. Can I run away from this? Finally, I decided that I have to help this unknown woman, even if I am risking my own life. I felt some strange transformation inside, the moral and physical strength, so I ran behind the bushes. I pulled the attacker off the girl. We fell to the ground and grappled for several minutes. Then the assailant jumped up and ran away. Breathing hard, I slowly came up to the girl who was cowering behind a tree. It was dark, so I could not see her face clearly. I felt that she was very frightened, so I talked to her from a distance. You are safe now. It's okay. The man has run away. After a few moments, I heard her words with a great amazement in her voice. Dad, is that you? And then I realized that the girl was my youngest daughter. Now, this is quite a dramatic story. We might not encounter this on a day-to-day basis. Some people might, some people might not. And sometimes we're put into positions where we have to make a decision quickly, whether we want to act courageously or cower and decide to do something else. In this particular situation, it's quite amazing that had he not helped this person, he would have been allowing his own daughter. So really, this is something for us to reflect about when we talk about moral courage and how we decide to live our lives and loving our neighbor. Because we never know. I mean, this particular girl, if perhaps he wasn't her daughter, she's somebody's daughter or somebody's niece or somebody's friend. She's cared about. So it warrants us to think twice when Jesus tells us to love our neighbor about what we would actually do in this situation and to reflect on that. Albeit again, our body goes into a fight or flight mode once we are in a position where we get scared or something is shocking us. So our body reacts in one way or another. Actually, it's technically 3. It's fight, flight, or you remain frozen, where there are people that just can't do anything. They can't run and they can't hide. They just become frozen. It's something for us to think about. Why is that important? Well, yes, because of situations like this, maybe not as so dramatic, but maybe there are much smaller circumstances on a smaller scale in which we're dealing with people, and maybe we're able to intervene and help others to make peace within their families or within our own family if we were to speak up courageously, to have that courage. But when we think about courage, what comes to mind to you guys? Like, what image crosses your mind when you hear the word courage? Do you think of like one of those moms who's like lifting up I don't know how heavy a car is, but a really heavy car because her baby fell underneath it, or there's those weird stories you hear, this incredible strength a mother can have when her child is in danger? Or is it something else? Do you courage to walk up to someone you care about and tell them how you feel? But does anyone want to share what their idea of what courage is, or how they would define it, what it means to them? Don't everyone jump up at once? Brave soul.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
I'd like to say that it would be like a willpower. So in any moment where you feel this will to do something, I would say that's courage. Willpower, a higher willpower.
Thank you. What's your name? Stanley, thank you so much for your comment. Appreciate it. Anybody else? What comes to mind? A blank canvas? Nothing? Okay. All right, we have some shy people in the audience today. That's okay. Yeah, Yasko's not here, neither is Paula. So, courage defined according to the dictionary. The American Heritage Dictionary defines courage as the state or quality of mind or spirit that enables one to face danger, fear, or vicissitudes with self-possession, confidence, and resolution, and also bravery. However, this is a Spiritist Center, and we want to also integrate this, obviously, from a Spiritist perspective. So we're going to be utilizing not only Joanna's words, but also the words from the Gospel according to Spiritism and the Spirit's book. So in the Gospel, they refer to courage as something that will be greatly needed by each individual if they are to triumph over themselves rather than triumph over others. Therefore, let each one of us use all their strength to combat their own selfishness, certain that this monstrous devourer of all intellects, this offspring of pride, is the cause of all the miseries found in this world. It is a denial of charity, and consequently, the greatest obstacle to human happiness. So we must really reflect about these really strong words from the spirits in this particular chapter 11, item 11, because they say that selfishness is what keeps us farthest from God, from contact with our higher purpose, with our higher meaning in life. But we must be courageous enough to face our own selves. In Spiritism, we talk a lot about obsession and the different types of obsession and spirit obsession and disturbances and all these really fantastic, what's the word? These fantastic things that go on. But however, the reality of the situation is that we should not be living our lives blaming others for our own issues, i.e., it's a spirit, I'm under a disturbancy, someone hexed me, or it's just a spiritual disturbancy. And so you sort of are able to deflect any personal responsibility, and we blame it on the spirits. Yes, obviously, there's always a spirit involvement, whether it's our spirit guide, our other friendly spirits, or not so friendly, or ones who really don't care for us at all, and I'm putting that nicely. However, again and again and again, the Spiritist teachings want us and point us in the direction to ourselves, to self-reflect, and how important it is to do that. Are we working on ourselves? If you've never had the feeling like, man, this is hard, you're probably not working on yourself. Or you've already reached the level where you're pretty perfect almost, or you're like doing really, really well, you just are an elevated soul, great. But I'm not. I haven't reached that. So I think most of us aren't. So if you have never had that feeling of, wow, life is hard, this is difficult, or this is a challenge, you're probably not you're not self-reflecting, or you haven't ever been forced to self-reflect. That's not to say, again, that if your life has been wonderful and roses and flowers and butterflies and rainbows, that's bad. No, it's not. But we all have our own levels of challenges and difficulties. But it always warrants us, because of that, to think about courage and Jesus, which we'll talk about here in a minute. In the Spirit's book, St. Louis, question number 1019, he states, all of you, men and women of faith and goodwill, work therefore with zeal and courage for the great work of regeneration, for you will reap 100-fold the grain of wheat that you have sown. Unfortunate are those who place all their joys in the things of this world, for they will suffer more privations than the pleasures they have had. And above all, unfortunate are the selfish, for they will not find anyone to help them bear the burden of their miseries. So as we think about the word courage, we want to probably also think about selflessness. Because much like the story, for those of you who might have come in late, not heard the story, we can share it later. But much like the man in the story, he had that brief moment to make a decision whether or not he wanted to be courageous to help this woman who was in need. He was selfless. So when we're talking about learning how to be courageous, there is a definite level of selflessness we need to have, where we're no longer self-centered in a negative sense, and we're focusing on how we can help others around us. It's important to help ourselves, first and foremost, because if I'm drowning, how can I save you? So I need to, when you're on the airplane, they tell you, if there's a decompression in the cabin, you have to put your own oxygen on first. It's the same theory in life. You got to do that first. Something for us to think about as we move on, sort of building the blocks to understanding Jesus and courage. Joanna de Angelis actually starts out her chapter in the following way. She begins to describe Jesus and courage in such a beautiful way. And she says, the courage of Jesus. His life was one of constant challenge. He never failed to act rightly, boldly. The message he brought with the aim of freeing human minds for the truth made him the champion of courage. You might say to yourself, or you're saying to yourself right now perhaps, or those who are watching on the web, well, I'm not Jesus. I'm not anywhere near that position. It's okay. We're talking about setting a goal for ourselves, personal goals. So where is our endpoint? Yes, we would like to be more Christ-like. People talk a lot about Christ consciousness. This is what it is, in one sense anyway. Molding ourselves or following in the footsteps that Christ left for us, the teachings that he left for us, to look at his life and say, I want to live my life like that. I want to bring goodness to others and to myself, despite the challenges. Joanna goes on to say, he never concurred with wrongful conduct, cloaked as lawfulness, arrogance masked as humility, injustice backed up by the powerful, hypocrisy dressed up as honesty, or any sort of discrimination under social, economic, racial, or religious justifications. He was for everybody. He wasn't against anyone. And the examples of this were the life that he lived. And we've all know these examples of his moral courage. The story of the Samaritan, if those of you who are not familiar who the Samaritans or what they meant at that time, they were the detested at that time, the disregarded, We have people now, we have different races, different groups of people that society might look down on. And that's kind of what the Samaritans were at that time. But Jesus wanted to prove a point, that he chose to act with solidarity, to love, and to wanting to show those around him that these people aren't dirty, they're not unclean, they're not unlovable. All people are lovable, even those who we have deemed otherwise. He also chose a disgraced woman to be a messenger of the good news of his resurrection. We know a lot about Mary of Magdalene, the life that she lived. It wasn't one of great morality up until she met Jesus. And it was, even till today, we look at the escort business as something really degrading. And women who, and men who sell their bodies as something really degrading. And perhaps it is. But Christ and what he taught was more about that saying, hate the sin and not the sinner. So, we don't have to agree with the wrong conduct, but we also don't have to hate people. Does that make sense? We feel like that's a hard concept sometimes, because sometimes we understand something on an intellectual and cognitive level, but we emotionally just don't feel that way. Like, I can understand that I need to love my neighbor, and I totally get that intellectually and cognitively. I understand that. But my neighbor pisses me off. He continuously leaves his dog poop everywhere. And when it's windy out, I'm using this example. Actually, my neighbor's pretty great. Both my neighbors, they're awesome. But let's just say this is how I might feel. There are some neighbors who do this, because in our Facebook page of our condominium, we see complaints all the time, like, who left their dog's poop and this and that, and your person in unit 107, your trash is blowing all over the place. And people get into screaming matches on Facebook about such things. So yes, a lot of us understand things, but to actually feel it emotionally, it's difficult, especially when someone is pushing our buttons. And that's something Joanna is really good at getting to the root of, about making us realize that it's not about the other person, that if someone is pushing your buttons, it's because there was a button to push in the first place, meaning there is some imbalance, something we need to work on internally. There's something that a friend of mine gave me recently. It was a list of reflections, questions to ask ourselves when we are feeling, if I can pull it up, when we are feeling like we need to. So 10 questions to ask yourself when you are taking something personally, or you might perceive yourself, or someone might tell you that you might be taking something seriously. One question to ask yourself: what am I feeling in this moment? Is this something that typically makes me feel this emotion or something similar? Does this person typically try to hurt or upset me? When they did X, was it absolutely directed at me? Is there anything I did that I need to investigate further? If I played a role, can I take responsibility for my part? What else might be causing them to behave in this way? Is this really about me? Can I be 100% certain it's about me? Should I give them this much power over my reaction and mood? What would it be like to not react to this? Do I need to discuss this issue with the other person, or can I resolve my reaction on my own? I actually posted this to my social media account because we thought it was really beneficial, something that we should screenshot, keep in your smartphone, to think about every time someone is irking you or getting on your nerves. It's just pushing those buttons for us to self-reflect and to really reanalyze and reframe the situation that we're enduring. Because everything is about perception. How I perceive something to be is my reality. So much like this father, this man, in that moment, he initially perceived himself to be in a situation where he wasn't safe. But at some point he said, you know what? I'm just going to go with this. I want to help this person. Luckily enough, was his daughter that he was helping. So it's something for us to always be contemplating. That's why Joanna's books are so good. To not be read once. They're not coffee table books. These are, I like to think of them as like textbooks, even though they don't look like one. But they're rich, just like a textbook. Now, this particular book is not as deep as I would say maybe existential conflicts, the psychology of gratitude, and other books of hers in the psychological series that I think were sold out of. But there are a lot of other ones that she has that are much more deeper. So this one's a little more, this is like Diet Coke. It's not the real Coke with all the sugar, so it's kind of like diet. It's lighter, softer. So it's not as hard to digest. So if you're looking at something that's a little bit not too heavy, but still gives you enough spiritual reflection, this is a great book to have, a great book to give as a gift as well, because she goes through all different types of emotions and how Christ approached that particular emotion or quality, in which case we're talking about courage. She goes on to say, he, Christ, made himself the voice of the humble and neglected, of those without rights or support, so that their justifiable complaints would be heard. That sounds great, right? Like we hear about activists in many arenas, and we might hear about it on the TV or social media. Think, wow, that's great. That's cool. But until you're put in that position where you are in a group or a sect of people who's being discriminated against, you might not realize how important this statement is. It's pretty huge. And if you begin to change your mind a little bit and think about the marginalized people in society, who those people might be in today's modern day age, there's a vast number of them, and how we should be charitable and kind towards those who are being marginalized and pushed to the side. And how much we can begin to change our mind a little bit. Say we, in our small little circle, because you might say, well, I'm not an activist, I'm not a politician, I'm not a lobbyist, I don't have that kind of time or money. You don't have to be any of those things. In your own small circle, in your work, we see a lot of conversations that happen, a lot of jokes that happen, and we can be a force for change by not being that person that just goes along with what everyone else says, just because, well, I don't want to I don't want to be confrontational. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to draw attention to myself. It's not that big of a deal. But it is, especially if you've gone through it. She goes on to say, he socialized with individuals of so-called ill repute, without fear of contamination, and completely disregarded those who had ill-gotten privileges to which they secretly surrendered. So in order to understand this particular statement, at that time that Jesus lived, if you didn't follow Judaism and you did certain things you would do, if you didn't follow those rules, you were considered unclean. And if you were to come in contact with that unclean person, you were now contaminated. So Jesus went out of his way to get in contact with those people who and become contaminated, to prove to other people that doesn't exist. It's a perception, and it's a fallacy at the very least. None of us are contaminated. We're at different levels of understanding and growth, But he wanted to show that our lives, our purpose, how we should be acting is love towards our neighbor. But again, until we're really put into a difficult position in our lives where we feel we've been marginalized or hurt profoundly, and we feel like we are looking to others for support and for help and we're not seeing it, then you begin to feel a little bit more of this. When you go through struggles, that's the beauty and the poetry of pain. Because it allows us to come in contact with our own humanity and the humanity of others. She goes on to say, he, Christ, spoke gently to sufferers, but emphatically and in a virile manner to wrongdoers, flatterers, and cowards, whom he never feared. He didn't negotiate favors or submit to human conventions. He was humble, but never subservient, affable, but never sentimental, a friend, but never a subaltern. So he always had a balance. Joanna has this saying that she says in Happy Life, I believe, not so much by sea or land. So it's like, I think my husband would say, I think it's in Portuguese, but he translates it to English. It's like you can't be 80% or 20. Is that 80? Can be 80 or 8%, yeah. So you have to have a balance, basically, in life. And that's what Jesus was trying to show us. So in psychology, there is this description of the anima and the animus within us. It's our male and female counterparts that each one of us have. Yes, we all have those counterparts within us. And Christ was perfect on both parts. He was able to display both parts perfectly. So that is our goal and our aim. Joanna goes on to give us advice in this particular chapter as to what we should do, our behavior before Jesus, when we think of him in our private moments. She says, lean on him. This is her sentence. Lean on him, period. In times of trouble or otherwise, see him. In harrowing doubt or persecution, consider how he would handle the situation and do as your upright conscience inspires you. There was a phrase that was made popular maybe in the 90s. I was a kid when it became popular, or so I remember it when I was a kid. WWJD, what would Jesus do? So there was a time where a lot of people were like wearing those necklaces and the shirts, and it was like all the rage. It's still pretty pertinent. It's, despite the fact that it was popular, it was a fad that came and went, it's still something for us to really think about in the situations we find ourselves in. What would Jesus do? Now, in a split second where you're walking in a park and you hear the screams of somebody, you don't necessarily have a lot of time to think about, well, let me think here for a second. What would Jesus do? No, sometimes we need to make a quick decision fast. And hopefully it's the best and the right decision that we make. But she actually, when she states, do as your upright conscience inspires you, she's sort of alluding to the fact that in Spiritism, we're taught that the laws of God are written on our conscience. So deep down inside my soul, I know what is right and what is wrong. I just need to tap into that part of myself. Some people refer to it as the higher consciousness, Christ-like consciousness, my higher self, whatever it is, but it's there for us to tap into. She goes on to say, serenely ponder Jesus' courage and follow his example. Have the courage to live. I truly believe that when Joanna and the way that they translated the book, they kept the same format. I would like to think. I believe so. So she actually has the first sentence by itself, I believe, to make an impact. And likewise, when she says, have the courage to live, with an exclamation mark, it's because suicide rates, not just when this book was published, but even until today, we have some of the highest rates of suicide in adolescents, young children under the age of 13, and of course, older people in different age brackets in different regions of the world. She's saying that for a definitive reason, because a lot of people lose hope. And unless you were ever put in a position where you felt hopelessness, it's difficult to understand the afflictions that others go through, especially those that suffer from emotional issues, because you don't know what it's like to fear utter helplessness and darkness and an endless abyss that seems like it'll never, that sensation of just continuous falling and there's never a bottom that you're going to hit. But there are many souls that feel that way for many lifetimes. Now on Thursdays, here at the Spiritist Society of Baltimore, we're going to begin the study of the book Heaven and Hell. How many people have ever cracked open this book? How many people have read it cover to cover? No? I didn't see your hand go up. Oh, okay. You don't remember. All right. It must be age related. It's okay. We're not trying to judge anyone. We're not trying to make anybody feel bad. That's okay. I grew up in a Spiritist family. I probably cracked this open a couple times, maybe a little bit more. It's a fantastic book, and it gives a lot of examples of spirits that have passed over. They give communications about the different kinds of lives that they lived. They give communications of happy spirits and also really sad spirits and not so happy spirits that discarnated and who were on the physical planet. They were like lazy or they were misguided, and they give the communication of their new reflections on life post-mortem. It's really fascinating. So if you would like to join us every Thursday, shameless plug, at 7:30 p.m., we're going to be starting after the new year. Thank you, Daniel. Yes. But you don't have to participate in our book club. You can take it upon yourself to read it. It's a really good reading. It's really fascinating to hear the different stories. They're short. They're not really like pages and pages long. There might be one or two that are kind of long, but to hear the stories is really fascinating, really interesting to hear. Especially the ones that talk about the dark times in their lives, the sad ones, the ones that experience extreme pain and affliction, and how they self-reflected in their new reflections. It's very interesting. She goes on to say, don't bury your situation or secretly hide behind it, behind excuses and lies. Picture yourself bathed in the light of his teachings and break the shackles that bind you to fear, insecurity, instability, and mental/physical suffering. Research has shown that meditation works, that yoga helps tremendously, sometimes even better than medication, although please always take the right medication. We don't want anyone getting sick. But those adjunct therapies, meditation, yoga, walking meditation, all different types of different therapies that I know Leo has talked about from the book Plenitude, and the chapter, I believe that's entitled Alternative Therapies, yeah. So when she mentions this is not just some poetic, beautiful wording that she's saying. This is legitimate science she's actually referring to and alluding to. So when she says, picture yourself bathed in the light of his teachings, she's actually asking us to do a meditation here, or she's encouraging us to do this meditation with Jesus. And we actually have a CD somewhere here, over there, that there's like a meditation with Jesus and you encounter Jesus. It's a very good meditation to have. I'll tell you why, because when we try to meditate at his vibrational level, we really raise up our vibration tremendously. And it's really good if you are really in any situation in your life, whether you're down in the dumps or you're doing all right. It's just a great encounter with yourself and with our higher self, if you will. So let's never take for granted or take her words for a grain of salt, because they're very intentional, the ways in which she says things, and there's purpose and reasoning behind it. There's science behind what she says. She says, confident of victory, serenely confront your limitations and anxieties. Do not shirk your responsibilities. Do not become depressed or remorseful with each failure, but learn how not to repeat it. Experience is the summary of the attempts that have brought positive and negative results. Never fear people by endowing them with superiority and worth that they clearly don't have. Do respect everyone's achievements. However, consider and use such examples for your own motivation so that you too may be just as successful. Let's go back one quote real quick. And I know for those of you in the back, it might be hard to see in the bottom screen here, and I apologize. But she says, never fear people by endowing them with superiority and worth that they clearly don't have. What does that mean? Anybody want to take a stab at that? It's okay. We don't have a lot of talkers here. It's okay. It's okay to be introverts. What she's saying there, I'll give you an example. I work for a large company, and the CEO is very intimidating. Just physically looking at him, he can be intimidating. His look, his walk, his talk, everything about him, and people are generally extremely intimidated by him. And there's this thing in psychology that, or in our minds, that everybody does this, where we tell ourselves stories. We all do this, whether you are aware of it or not. You'll look at something, and you have no facts about the situation, but you tell yourself a whole story about what's going on. For instance, you are walking into Wegmans and you see a woman of a particular religious belief who maybe is wearing certain clothing, and you might begin thinking in your mind, oh, this woman is this, this, and this, and telling a whole story. It could be positive, it could be negative, but regardless, we tell ourselves a story. And many people will tell themselves a story about others, saying, well, this person is just so much better than I am. Oh, they're so above me. We sort of create this inferiority complex within us because we look at others like they're so superior. I'm not talking about when we look at people like the Dalai Lama or when we talk about Mother Teresa, who those people are really, who are truly humble and live their lives in a great way. Those we can endow them with superiority. But I'm talking about average people we meet on the street, or even, for instance, we'll give you an example. I forget what year it was. It was the year Obama was inducted. Maybe 2009. Something like that. Where we were driving to Delaware. We stopped at the Delaware rest station, and it was packed because people had been in D.C. and there were hundreds of people, and I guess a lot of people were just in the local area. So this rest station was packed with people. So, and I apologize for telling something personal, but I just want to prove a point. I've always loved Ricky Martin, loved his music, wasn't into Menudo, but loved him after post Menudo and his everything about him. So with that in mind, we're at the Delaware rest station, and I see this guy, and I'm like, that's Ricky Martin. And my husband and my sisters are like, and my brother-in-law's like, no, it's not. What would he be doing in Delaware? He's probably in Miami, like, or Hollywood or something. He's not here. I'm like, guys, it's him. So I literally wait outside the man's bathroom, or a little bit farther from the men's bathroom. My siblings call me Inspector Gadget because I can pick up on little details about behaviors. So I noticed there was a man standing outside with like something in his ear, and like his stance was like one of like a security guard or something. And I was like, that's probably his security guard. And my family's like laughing at me, like you're psychotic, you're crazy. So I make everybody wait. So we're all waiting, and after maybe like 15 minutes, I guess, he comes out and he goes over to his security guard. I'm like, see, they're together. And he makes like a gesture, like, oh, his stomach. I was like, oh my gosh, maybe he had like, the runs or something. So I was like, I'm gonna go up to him. And again, family's like, you're crazy. This is a random person. I'm like, I don't care. So I go up to him, and he's like, in this one part of the Delaware Rest Station, there's like the food court, and then there's just like a little shop where you can buy like bananas and yogurt. So he goes into the shop. It looks like he grabs Gatorade or something. So I like calmly and like really cool, like, I'm like, so are you Ricky Martin? He looks over at me. He's like, yeah. And I was like, okay. I was like, and I start freaking out, but like inside of myself, but not externally, just in my mind. And I guess he saw, like he just knew, I guess he has thousands of fans, of course, they react this way. So he asked me to hold on. He's like, just wait. So I went outside of the store. I waited for him. He purchased whatever he needed to purchase. He came over to me, and I'm like shaking. And I got a picture with him. And after I got a picture with him, people started recognizing. They're like, is that Ricky Martin? So then he like scooted out of there really quick so no one else could catch him. But my husband and I were talking about that experience, like what is such a big deal? Like, it's not like he's the Dalai Lama. He's just like a famous singer who's gorgeous. Like, it was a big deal. So we endow people with this superiority thing. We make them gods in our lives. They're really not. I mean, it was really funny because I'm pretty sure the gestures he was making to his security guard, I guess, that he probably just had a stomach ache. So I'm like, this guy has stomach aches like all of us. They have regular problems just like you and I do. They're regular people. They just happen to be extremely talented and aesthetically beautiful. Some people just have that. The rest of us, we deal with it. So, but something for us to reflect about, for us not to do that. Because my husband was saying to me, I'm not impressed by people like that. They don't impress me. Like, whatever. He's like, oh, okay. He didn't want to get a picture with him. He's like, whatever. Meh. So that's okay. Maybe certain people are more evolved and can recognize this and follow Joanna and not endow people with this superiority and worth. But something for us to be cognizant of in our day-to-day lives when we're interacting with people, to not attribute more worth to them than we do to ourselves. We might say, oh, that person, that person's special. Like, I can't even be around them because I'm not in their league. I heard a family member of mine who's single, he was talking to me about this. He was out somewhere, and there was like this beautiful girl, and he's like, oh, I totally didn't go up to her because she's so out of my league. Like, just, I sit on the other side of the place. And I was like, why do you have that mentality? You have no idea who this person is. No idea what internal conflicts they have, what struggles they've had. Maybe they're thinking the same thing about you. We don't know. Something for us to think about. She ends with this particular statement by saying, do respect everyone's achievements. However, consider and use such examples for your own motivation so that you too may be just as successful. In other words, in layman's terms, don't be jealous of others or envious. If you see someone succeeding or doing well or achieving goals that you would like to have, take that as a source of encouragement, like, wow, I want to reach that. I want to be there. I remember when a really good friend of mine was promoted, and she had been in her job for a while, and she was promoted, and all of her friends at her work were not happy for her. They were very upset because they felt that they were better than she. and that they should have gotten the promotion. So it's sad when we see things like that. We say it's human nature in a sense. The nature of the beast, perhaps. But it's not the kind of thing we want to perpetuate. We need to reframe our perspectives when we look at things and tell ourselves we can be just as successful. We have a lot of negative internal dialogues with ourselves. A lot of times we don't even realize it. Watch what you say throughout the day. Pay attention. You walk past a mirror and you go, oh, need to lose this extra 5 pounds. Some of us need to lose more like 50 or 100, but that's okay. But pay attention to what you're saying, that internal dialogue you're saying to yourself. Like you walk past some really good-looking human being, you're like, wow, God, I wish I had those abs. Or, man, I wish I had that car. Or, man, I wish I had that family. Or, man, I wish I had those kids. Or whatever their situation is. We lower ourselves. We automatically put ourselves lower and have a bad perspective of ourselves. And it's negative. Does not serve us in any way. And that's a question we should ask ourselves. How is this serving me? Not in a selfish way, like it's all about me, but in the sense that, how is this helping me to get better, to grow? That is a question we should always keep in the back of our minds. Joanna actually ends this particular chapter with these final thoughts that she shares about courage. She says the following: courage is born in the moral values of people who choose upright conduct for life. Courage is born in the moral values of people who choose upright conduct for life. So at any moment, we can make a different decision and be courageous. It's a choice. It's not something that, oh, well, that person you're so courageous, I could never do that. No, it's a decision. Every day, our life consists of the different decisions and choices we make and the consequences of those things. It's just a choice. One that we can make, one that we should make and should consider. I'm looking at the time if I have enough time to tell you this really quick story. I think I've shared it before. I did share it before, but I'll just shorten it and make it really brief. There's a true story. It's on the internet. You can Google this, and I think it's even on YouTube. There's clips from the interviews from these two particular people. So there was a man with his pregnant wife and 3 kids in the back seat of their car. It was after dinner, maybe 6, 7 o'clock. They decided, let's go get ice cream nearby their house. Cool, great. They all get into the car, start driving to the Baskin-Robbins or whatever local ice cream place they're going to, and they get T-boned by a drunk 17-year-old driver, and everyone died but the father. So the father, retelling the story later, years later, said that in that moment when he came to, when he woke up, because he was knocked unconscious, he woke up and he said, when I looked at my wife, I knew she was dead. She wasn't breathing and there was a lot of blood. I knew she was dead. He said, I turned around and I saw my kids in the back seat. I knew they were dead. It was obvious. Too much blood, no movement. They were dead. And indeed they were. By the time the paramedics and everyone got there, they were dead on arrival, as they call them. DOA, yeah. So, or dead at the scene. So this father said there was a very quick moment where he turned his gaze outside to see the drunk driver who was also knocked out in his car. He could see him. And he said in that moment he felt that he had this huge choice between hating this young man for the rest of his life for killing his wife and kids, and his wife was pregnant, so that he also killed his unborn child, Or he could choose to forgive him. And he said, in that moment, I made the decision to forgive. So this particular man, and this particular 17-year-old who's now in his 20s or maybe older, have written a book together. They've gone on different speaking tours discussing forgiveness. And whenever I read this sentence or I think about courage or moral values, I think about this particular man whose name I don't remember, but you can Google man, drunk driver, forgiveness, and he'll pop up at some point. Because this particular man had that courage to just say, you know what? I'm going to forgive when it's really hard to do that. And that's an understatement. Because again, I say this because I've been through things in my life, and after I went through those things, I then reflected back and said, I used to think I knew what something was or what X, Y, and Z was, but I had no idea. Now that I've gone through it myself, now I understand. And it's your perspective changes once you go through that thing or a certain thing. Your life changes, your perspective changes. Especially when you go through something really difficult, really hard, really challenging, you gain a new perspective. And it's a choice we have. She goes on to finalize this chapter. She says, the courage to live must be practiced constantly. Overcoming the small obstacles of timidity, fear of failure, inferiority complexes, and real or imaginary illnesses, strengthening the soul with each triumph and rethinking one's actions after each failure. She always alludes to self-reflection. Whenever we are experiencing something in life, we should be self-reflecting. How can I grow from this? What's the lesson in this? How can I help others in the future with this? She goes on to say that courage is an achievement much different from recklessness. When we talk about courage, we're not talking about the courage to go bungee jumping. We're not talking about the courage to go do something like, fly 500 feet in the air, however high it is, they're 300,000, I don't know, and like jump out of the plane. Skydiving, I was looking for the word. We're not talking about that type of courage. We're talking about moral courage here. And that's what Joanna's referring to. We're not talking about that doing things that are reckless and irresponsible. We're not encouraging you to do any of those things, but we're encouraging you to go inward because it's much more difficult. It's much more easier to go skydiving and drop out of a plane at 30,000 feet than to face your own self. If you don't believe me, then you haven't tried looking at yourself yet, because it's hard. When you really want to get down to the nitty-gritty of who you are, your true self, it can be really hard. It can be really challenging to face the truths about ourselves. I always like to think, and I always say that we all have, when you're driving, you have a blind spot, right? You guys all know what a blind spot is? I always say that each one of us, we're living our lives, and we have blind spots. We have things about ourselves we do not realize that we do, but it's not really good. It could be mild, maybe not so mild. Maybe your friend, partner, loved one kind of sometimes makes comments to you like, oh, I noticed you do this, this, this. And you're like, I don't do that. That's not me. But in fact, it is. Something for us to reflect about. Just as a sidebar. She says, courageous people wait, believe, and then act as the appropriate time, whereas reckless people act hastily, heartlessly, and irresponsibly. Use Jesus' courage as the example for your life and calmly press on. I apologize for those in the back. Can't really see the bottom quotes here, but we wanted to fit it all in one slide. Courage. Who knew there was so much meaning behind it and how important it is? But it really is, especially in our moments of challenges and difficulties, which everyone goes through. It's inevitable, some point or another. So I will end with these thoughts. Oops. And I can either open up for some comments, for anybody who wants to share anything that came to their mind while we were discussing these things, or any questions, or we can move to our passes moment. But I think Daniel has a question and or comment. Or we all can admire this beautiful photo I took. Just a joke. Yeah, from the internet. I took it from the internet. Yes.
Thank you, Kiss. It's a very nice talk about this other thing that we learn with Jesus, that is be courageous. One thing that also we learn with Jesus that was an act of courage, but we don't recognize, was when he kept in silence during the crucifixion, or when he was questioned by Pilate.
Pontius Pilate.
Yes. So that in itself teaches that sometimes we need to keep our mouth shut. And that is very difficult, especially in the society that we live nowadays, with so polarized situation, political, any place that we look in our society, we have this division. People always wanted to prove a point and to argue and raise their concern or their rights, and they don't know the time to keep in silence. And this becomes very challenging for us. I think courage also could be, silence sometimes. It's very difficult. I'm not saying that this is something that we need to do, because the line between keep silence and act is very thin. Because, what will help us to decide this is the degree of awareness that we have and wisdom, and how we acquire those virtues. Because this is virtue, be wise enough to make the right decision. You mentioned something about things that come that we need to make a fast decision. So if we have to make a fast decision in a situation that is fight or flight, will depend of the degree of awareness and wisdom that we have inside of us. If we are a violent person, we're going to react immediately with violence. If we are a peaceful person, we're going to remain calm. So we don't need even to read thousands of books to understand about ourselves. We just need to read ourselves before situations. And in that moment, we can tell ourselves what the degree we are. If our courage is still instinctive courage or moral courage. So it's something to us to thinking about, and I think in this time of the end of the year that we stop and we reflect about the year that is about to end and make those resolutions for next year. So this, I think, is something that we need to think about it. Next Saturday, we're going to talk about Jesus the Christ. So we're going to get some of those teachings that you brought from Joanna to reflect about what is this man that came to earth 2,000 years ago, more than 2,000 years ago. And we are still struggling to put in practice some of the virtue that he brought to us. I don't believe that he lies to us, that we are not able to accomplish what he did. But it has been taking many centuries for us, and we're struggling for us to understand his message. And thank you so much for bringing this. I think Joanna sometimes can be very, I would say, not challenged, but she really put the bar very high for us and push us to reflect upon ourselves. And I think the book still have 10 chapters to go, isn't it? This chapter 10 is a book of 20 chapters, so I'm, look forward to see what comes next. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. And I just wanted to add to something you said. Rosandro Klinge, he's a spiritist speaker in Brazil. He's also a psychologist. And he told this story a while ago. And he said that one of his colleagues had arrived at work very distraught and like shooken up. And when he asked her what was wrong, she said, and this is in Brazil, she said, I was just robbed. And he's like, oh my gosh. So everyone was getting around her and helping her and do whatever you do when you're, I guess in Brazil, it's the same thing here, call the police, I guess. And he was talking to her, like tried to calm her down to work through because she was really distraught. And she was like, he's like, talk to me, what's going on? What are you feeling? And she's like, it wasn't the robbery itself that made me feel so shocked. So, and he was like, what? She said, I was shocked at the way I reacted. I didn't know I had it in me. So he began to explain, he actually premised his statement, and I should have done so as well, by saying this particular colleague of his was a very mild-mannered woman, very soft-spoken, everything you would think about a librarian, quiet, soft, or a yoga teacher, gentle, going with the flow, very cool, calm, and collect. But on that particular day, she said when this man went to grab her purse or watch or whatever it was, she had nails, and she took the nails and dug it deeply in his skin, and she had his skin under her nails. And she had this reaction where she just, like an animal, like tried to maul him to death. And he ran off. And she was so shocked. And he said, I was so shocked because this is a mild-mannered, calm, librarian-like lady. And she had this reaction. So she was shocked at what came out of her. And that just goes to show you that we are, at the risk of sounding cheesy, like onions. We have many layers to us that we are not yet aware of. So that's why it warrants us to study more, read more, and educate ourselves. So with that being said, Daniel, I'm going to ask you to play the soft music so we can transition to our passes.